Okay, welcome to this tutorial on creating sharpening for images. So we're going to take this image here and we're going to apply sharpening to it. You can see it's a low resolution image, 1024 by 768. So I'm going to drag it onto the GIMP workspace and it should open, and then we'll start editing it. So we're going to apply selective sharpening to this by using a layer mask. As I mentioned, it's a low resolution image, so it's already zoomed in 100% at the moment. So in order to start doing this, we're going to create a duplicate layer. So the duplicate layer is what we will apply the sharpening to, and also after we apply the Unsharp mask, I will also look at applying a high pass sharpening to in this image. So let's get started. So I'm going to go down here and click on the duplicate layer icon in the layer menu, the layer panel, to create a duplicate, and then we're going to apply the sharpening to this, and this is in order to get at least a little bit of a non-destructive effect. And we get this by going to filters, then enhance, and then sharpen unsharp mask, and we get the sharpen dialog box, which gives us the radius, amount, and threshold. So radius is the pixel radius of the sharpening, amount is the amount of sharpening, and then threshold will dial it back a little bit, and you can use the preview to turn it on and off. So it's always good to over sharpen a little bit when you're doing the sharpening. It avoids having to come back in and reapply sharpening, and we can dial it back a bit then by just reducing the opacity of our duplicate layer, so the sharpening, it doesn't end up as being as strong. It's a good idea to keep an eye on how the sharpening affects the image as you're editing it, and of course you can do that by, as I demonstrated, clicking on the preview button, or in addition to that you can also use the split view as I show here to see how much you sharpened it. So you can see this is fairly over sharpened now, but we're going to turn that down a little bit. You can also use a blending mode, so sometimes luminance is a good blending mode to use, because it avoids then the flat areas of tone from them getting pixelated. And then also you can turn the opacity down to make the effect a little bit stronger. You can see this is also affecting the skin tones quite a bit here if we turn the sharpening on and off, and that's something that you don't necessarily want when you're sharpening a portrait. So to avoid that, we can add selective sharpening by turning the sharpening off using a layer mask filled with black, and then just applying it using the paintbrush to selective area. So we come down here to the layer panel, click on the create layer mask icon, and then make sure you have the layer selected that you're putting the layer mask on, and you need to have black full transparency selected. That will hide the entire adjustment behind layer mask. So then we can go ahead and paint back in the areas that we want to see the sharpening for instance the eyes, and then also a little bit on the hair as well. So I'm going to click on add here. The layer mask is now added, and we can go ahead and use the paintbrush tool to select, make a selective adjustment on the eyes and a little bit on the hair as well. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to get a better view, and go up to the tool menu, paint tools, and then choose my paintbrush. Over here then in the tool panel for that tool, I'm going to change maybe these settings. So I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit, because it's good to have that dial back a tiny bit that you don't need it. And then the size is okay. I think 51 is okay for the eyes. And then of course you should check the hardness too. Make sure the brushes, I'm using this softer edged brush with a 50% hardness. And then you can go ahead and just start painting over the area of the eyes, and you'll notice that on the layer mask you get these areas where once you release the mouse button where the sharpness has been applied to. Of course you need to make sure before you apply these that you have the color white selected. As you can see here, I have black as the foreground color. That needs to be changed by either clicking on the arrow or hitting X on the keyboard. And now I can go ahead and paint over in the eye. And when I release the mouse button, you can see a little dot of white or grey appearing here on the layer mask. So that indicates where we've edited on the layer mask. Every time you brush over then the effect will get a little bit stronger, because remember we have our opacity of the brush set to about 49%, and you can see that when I turn it on and off. So now we want to do the hair then a little bit as well. So I'm going to zoom out using the minus key, and maybe we need a little bit of a bigger brush using the hair for the hair, so I can increase the brush size. That's good. And then you can start brushing in on the hair, and again you'll see this indicated on the layer mask panel. And every time when you keep the mouse button pressed, it will only apply that 50% of the brush strength to the hair until you release the mouse button. And then once you release it and then press again, then that effect will get stronger every time you use the brush, every time you release the mouse button and press again. So you can see the sharpening that's been applied there to this layer. So the hair and the eyes are now sharpened using the Unsharp mask, and this using the layer mask, and the skin is unaffected, so it remains smooth and soft. Okay, so I think we'll have a look next at using the high pass filter. So I'm just going to go to the undo panel here and go back to my base image, and then we can go ahead and look at using the high pass filter on this to sharpen. And sometimes you get a better look with the high pass filter. You can try it with different images depending on how it looks, but again you're going to do it with a duplicate layer again to try and avoid that fully destructive changes. So with my duplicate layer selected, I'm going to apply a high pass filter by going to filters, back to the enhance menu, and then you have the third option down here, it's the high pass, and you get this dialog box here, and you'll see the picture will turn this very odd grey color, and this is kind of creating like a contrast mask almost, you would call it. So in order, the high pass will find the edges in images, so the differences between the contrast where there's bright and dark tones meet each other in the image, and based on that do the sharpening. So we can adjust that by increasing the STD dev, which it's recommended to keep low because that gives more contrast. It's less contrast if you increase it. And then of course you can increase the contrast by clicking on contrast too. So this looks good, so we can go ahead and apply this, and then in order to get that to work we need to use a blending mode of overlay on the image. And you can see now this looks quite nice. So if I turn it on and off, you can see it's quite a nice kind of subtle sharpness, and it may work better for some of your images than Unsharp mask works. So it's certainly worth trying this. And again, if you want to apply selective sharpening with this, you can use the same method that we used before, where we had our layer mask and we masked out the entire image, and then we just painted back in the areas where we wanted the sharpness to apply to. So you can by all means go ahead and do that with this image as well. I'm not going to do it here because we've already done it. I've already demonstrated it with the previous adjustment, but it will also work with the high pass sharpening method too. Okay, thank you for watching, and I hope this tutorial was helpful.